Yesterday, yesterday we had the discussion on shoulder girdle and shoulder joint was remaining. So we'll discuss the shoulder joint today. The movements possible at the shoulder joint are flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, medial or internal rotation, lateral or external rotation, and a combination of the first four, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, is called as circumduction. Shoulder joint is over. There are some muscles which are responsible, which we have anyway dealt with separately. What we will discuss today, mathematics, physics, vector analysis of muscle movement. The following concepts will be discussed when we are discussing vector analysis. Muscles act at joints only if they cross them. Muscles act at joints only if they means who? They means muscles. Them means who? Them means joint. That means muscles act at joints only if muscles cross joints. Is this clear? You have to understand what do we mean by the word muscles. What do we mean by the word act? What is at? What is joints? What is only? And what is cross? These are six concepts we are going to discuss. Strength of a muscle is directly proportional to its cross-sectional area. What do we mean by cross-sectional area? We'll discuss that. It is understandable if the muscle, if you exercise the muscle, the number of muscles does not increase, but the diameter increases. When the diameter increases, cross-sectional area increases, strength increases. But what exactly is cross-sectional area? Pinnate muscles lose their potency because of the oblique line of pull. We discussed this yesterday, that 90% of the power is still maintained, only 10% power is lost. So they do not lose much. Muscles act best if the line of pull is at right angles to the axis of movement. Muscles act best if the line of pull is at right angles to the axis of movement. And finally, line of muscle pull and axis of movement should be skew lines. I don't know whether you have heard of the word skew in geometry. Skew lines means lines which are non-intersecting and non-parallel. So they do not lie in one plane. If two lines lie in one plane, they'll either be parallel or they'll be intersecting. But if two lines are in two different planes, there is a possibility that they are not parallel to each other, yet they are not intersecting each other. So these 5 concepts must be understood. What do we mean by muscles? When we talk about muscles, we are including the contractile part, muscle belly, as well as the non-contractile part, tendons and aponeurosis. But we are not including ligaments, fibrous sheaths per se, which are surrounding the muscles. So we are including only the belly and the rounded tendon or the flattened tendon called aponeurosis. So when we say muscles act, if they cross them means muscles cross them. It need not be the muscle belly which crosses them. Even if tendons cross, that is crossed. Is this clear? What do we mean by act? When we talk about act, It's a movement produced by the muscles at a joint if no other forces, gravity, inertia, external forces, other muscles interfere. So the movement produced by a muscle when no other forces interfere is called the action of the muscle, which is also called as, we discussed yesterday, prime mover or agonist. But muscles muscles do act in different roles, antagonists, energists, fixators, and some more which we will discuss today. So action by definition is only the prime moving action. So you should understand when we say this muscle is acting, which means it is initiating and propagating the desired movement. All other roles are not called as action. Muscles act at joints. Should it be called as at joints or off joints? Movements off shoulder or movements at shoulder? Movements off elbow or movements at elbow? So, the preposition at and off carry different meanings. You use the word at a joint and off a region. So when you say movement of forearm at elbow joint, movement of forearm at elbow joint. So off is referred to a region and at is referred to the joints. If I say, keep your forearm on the table, now flex the elbow. Is the wrist moving? Of course it's moving. It was on the table in the beginning, then it moved up. So wrist is moving. But there is no movement at the wrist joint. It's a movement of the wrist. From the table it has gone up. Are you getting the point? But there is no movement at the wrist. That's why you should never use the word of a joint. Likewise, your whole body is moving because the earth is moving. You are not at one fixed point. But there is no relative movement between different parts of your own joints. Are you getting the point? So when there is a differential movement of one part with another, that is a movement at the joint of the region. But then when we say movement, flexion at the elbow is also same as flexion of the forearm. But when you are doing pull-ups, flexion at the elbow is actually flexion of the arm because forearm is fixed. That is what we discussed, reversal of origin insertion. So region can differ. Region can be forearm, region can be arm when the movements are at elbow. So whether the arm is moving or forearm is moving, reversal of origin insertion. That's why always use the word at. Suppose in the exam there is a question, movements of shoulder joint. You can't write one sentence and get away with it. Shoulder, it's not movements of shoulder joints, it's movements at shoulder joint. Wrong question, full marks. Examiners and teachers have the liberty to use off and at whenever they want. But as students, you must always use the correct terms. Because remember, there are only two rules of examination. Rule number one, the examiner is always correct. That's rule number one. Rule number two, in the event of the examiner being wrong, refer to rule number one. So no arguments with examiners. Muscles act at joints only if they cross them. What is a joint? We thought we knew everything about joints because there was a whole lecture on joints. There is something called as structural joints, which are important for surgical and clinical conditions. We are talking about the capsule of a synovial joint, which is limiting the joint. And there is something called as functional joints, which are important in movements and muscle crossing. So when we are talking about movements and we are talking about muscle crossing, we are talking about vector analysis, we have to use functional joints. For example, wrist joint has got a capsule. Inside that capsule is lower end of humerus, upper end of Allah, upper end of radius. All three are enveloped in a single capsule. So that's the elbow joint capsule, also called as, better word, cubital articulation. Cubiti is elbow. So cubital articulation. It actually consists of three separate joints, humerus and Allah, which is humero-ulnar joint, humerus and radius, humero-radial joint, and radius with Allah, radio-ulnar joint. Are you clear? So it's a three joint complex, the cubital articulation. When we talk about elbow, we are referring to humerus and Allah only. Although radius is very much a part of the joint, but radius moves with respect to Allah also. So radio-ulnar joint and humero-radial joint are the other joint complex. When you talk about elbow, humero-ulnar only. So a disease of the humero-ulnar joint will automatically also involve the humero-radial joint. Will also involve the superior radio-ulnar joint, because they are a common joint capsule. The joint capsule decide how much should the infection spread. When you want to approach the elbow joint, you can approach either of the three complex, because surgically they are one joint, clinically they are one joint, but functionally they are three separate joints. Is it clear? Similarly, there is a joint between upper end of radius with upper end of Allah, then another joint between the lower end of radius and lower end of Allah. And there is a third joint between the shaft of the radius and the shaft of the Allah. But these are connected only by intraosseous membrane, which is called as syndesmosis. So if I ask you, how many synovial radio-ulnar joints are there in the human body? Options are 1, 2, 3 or 4. How many synovial radio-ulnar joints are there in the human body? You always like MCQs, huh? Giving the correct answer is, if you say 4, the correct answer is 2. If you say 2, the correct answer is 4. Either way you will be wrong. So you should ask, how many radio-ulnar joints are there? Structurally 4, functionally 2. In one upper limb, there is only functional one radio-ulnar joint. Even if there are structurally a superior joint and an inferior joint, let me give you an understanding. Keep your elbow on the table in a mid-prone position. Mid-prone. Mid-prone means thumb should be up. Okay? Now from this position, you can either pronate, that means palm down, or you can supinate, palm up. What I want to do from the mid-prone position is pronate the inferior radio-ulnar joint, simultaneously supinating the superior radio-ulnar joint. Not possible. Because superior radio-ulnar joint and inferior radio-ulnar joint are functionally one joint. They are structurally two separate joints, but functionally one. Now, you said, oh, this is opposite movement, it's not possible. Okay. From the full supine position, palm up, I want you to slowly pronate the inferior radiolar joint and quickly pronate the superior. That is also not possible. The movements at superior and inferior radiolar joint occur not only in the same direction, they also occur at the same speed. They are basically functionally a single joint. Is this clear? Why are we studying structural joint capsules? Because spread of infection and surgical approach, you require to have an understanding of the capsule of the joint. And for movements, you should understand what's the functional joint. You can't say this muscle acts at superior radioulnar joint. This muscle acts at radioulnar joint. There is no superior separate, there is no inferior separate, it's one joint. Whereas shoulder girdle and shoulder joint are two different joints, structurally as well as functionally. Shoulder girdle and shoulder joints are separate joints structurally and functionally. And when we talk about shoulder girdle, we are talking about the sternoclavicular joint and not the acromioclavicular joint. Acromioclavicular joint is a minor joint, not very important. Sternoclavicular joint allows the movements of protraction, retraction, elevation, depression. And the last two movements, forward rotation and return rotation, 60 degrees are possible, of which 40 degrees occurs at sternoclavicular joint. Only 20 degrees of rotation is possible at acromioclavicular. That is why we said acromioclavicular is a minor joint. No movements occur at acromioclavicular joint about protraction, neither retraction, nor elevation, nor depression. And of the 60 degree rotation, only 20 degrees are possible at acromioclavicular. Okay? That's why acromioclavicular is a minor joint, sternoclavicular is the important joint. And glenohumeral joint, the joint between the glenoid cavity of scapula along with the humerus, that is an important joint. That is the shoulder joint. How much degree can you move the shoulder joint? How many degrees can you abduct the shoulder joint? You can abduct the shoulder joint only by 120 degrees. But you can carry your arm all the way up to the head, overhead abduction. Here it appears as if it is 180 degrees. But actually, at the shoulder joint, there is 120 degrees. The remaining 60 degrees are scapular rotation. Scapular rotation. Scapula rotates with the humerus. So it's not a movement at the shoulder joint, it's a movement at the shoulder girdle. So the total 180 degree of shoulder abduction consists of 120 degrees of shoulder joint abduction and 60 degrees of scapular rotation. Different muscles, different joints help in bringing about overhead abduction. And it's not that first 120 degrees occurs at joints. Then you want more, then scapula will start rotating. Nothing like that. For every 30 degree of abduction, 20 degree movement occurs at shoulder joint, 10 degrees occurs at shoulder girdle. So it's a 2:1 ratio. So that 180 is equal to 120 plus 60. If you want to bring about shoulder abduction to 90 degrees, 60 degrees at shoulder joint, 30 degrees of shoulder girdle. 2:1 ratio. Although this is a 2:1 ratio, it is not uniformly 2:1 ratio throughout 180 degrees. The first 15 degrees of abduction is only at shoulder joint. So we said 2:1 ratio, but does not mean everywhere the ratio is same. First 50 degree, 15 at joint, 0 at girdle. Girdle starts moving only after 15 degrees in the ratio of 2:1. Of course, in the later part, overhead abduction, there is more girdle movement than joint movement. So the balance average is 2:1. Most of our shoulder joints in a functional position is 15 degree abducted. Say when you are writing, walking, etc. Nobody keeps the shoulder joint fully adducted. That's not a functional position. Slightly abducted. And a slight abduction is 15 degree abduction. So girdle is not involved in the first 15 degrees. The first 15 degrees are also movements brought about exclusively by supraspinatus. Deltoid comes into action only after 15 degrees. That is why supraspinatus is called as the most overworked muscle in the body. Because shoulder always remains in 15 degree abducted in functional position. So, and that first 15 degree is not involving deltoid, not involving girdle, only involving shoulder joint, and that is done by supraspinatus. Somebody pointed out this is a mistake in this statement. Supraspinatus is the most overworked muscle in the body is an incorrect statement because the most overworked muscle in the body is cardiac muscle. Okay? So you have to modify the statement. Supraspinatus is the most overworked skeletal muscle in the body. You will say even the back muscles are overworked. 16 hours of the day keep your erect posture. But it's not a single muscle, it's a group of muscles. Different fibers contract at different times. So the back muscles do have some rest in between. And most of the times you sit with your back rested on some structure. So automatically the back muscles can go into rest. Muscles act at joints only if they cross them. The only word is very important, where you place. Suppose you place the only word, only is there, let us place it at the beginning. Only muscles act at joints if they cross them. That means only muscles can act. Huh? That means gravity, inertia, external force don't act. Wrong statement. So you can't place the word only in the beginning. Muscles act at joints only if they cross them. No, let's place the word only in between. Muscles only act at joints if they cross them. That means they do not play role of antagonists, they do not play role of synergists, they do not play role of action of paradox. They only act. That's prime mover action. What is the action of paradox? Yesterday we discussed that when you lift up a glass of water, biceps is not involved because that will cause spilling of the water. Only brachialis helps in lifting up the glass of water. After you have drunk the water, you want to keep the glass gently down on the table. Gravity is the prime force which is acting, and brachialis goes into slow, sustained relaxation. Slow, sustained relaxation. That means brachialis is extending the elbow. Actually, gravity is extending the elbow, and brachialis is contracting to slow down the force of gravity. Such a opposite action of what a muscle does is called as action of paradox. Initially it feels, somebody says, brachialis extending the elbow. What nonsense. Brachialis extends the elbow, sustained, controlled extension when external forces are acting like gravity. That's called action of paradox. In an action of paradox, some other force must be acting. Then only the muscle can act paradoxically. If there is no external force acting, like you are in outer space, no gravity involved, then triceps is required for extending because there's no gravity there. Here biceps and brachialis will play a role of antagonist. Muscles act only at joints if they cross them. Only at joints. Nowhere else. Then how will you explain violent expiration? Which muscles are acting? Where are they acting? Which joints are they acting? Expulsive acts, when you are defecating, vomiting, micturating. Where is the muscle acting at joints? Muscles can act at different places, not only at joints. Muscles act at joints only if they cross. Muscles act at joint only if they cross them. Only if the muscles cross them, then they will act. If anything else crosses, it will not act. That means blood vessels, nerves, ligaments should not cross the joints. Because muscles will act only if they cross them. Nobody else should cross them. That is also not correct. So the placement of the word only is extremely important. Muscles act at joints if they cross only them. If muscles cross any blood vessel, any nerve, any ligament, it will not act. You should act. Is it clear why we say muscles act at joint only if they cross them? What is cross? A dog crosses the street. So we understand from one end of the street it goes to the other end. Although people do often say it's a zebra crossing. I have never seen a zebra cross the road. I have often seen dogs and cows crossing the road. But anyway, maybe it started from Africa, where zebras do cross the road. So let's try to understand the word cross. You have to say yes or no. Okay? Clavicular fibers of pectoralis major sternoclavicular joint. Cross, yes, no. Clavicular fibers of pectoralis major cross sternoclavicular joint. Yes or no? Yes, no. Okay, some more questions. Pectoralis minor crosses the sternoclavicular joint. Pectoralis minor crosses the sternoclavicular joint. Yes, no. Levator scapulae, the one which is on the back, levator scapulae crosses the acromioclavicular joint. Yes, no. Latissimus dorsi, another muscle of the back, crosses the sacroiliac joint. Long head of biceps brachii crosses the shoulder joint. Brachialis crosses the radioulnar joint. Pronator teres crosses the elbow joint. See, yes, no, yes. In other words, you will need to understand the meaning of the word cross. Only then you will understand whether they cross or they don't cross. When you are talking about crossing versus not crossing, all you have to know is the attachments of the muscles. Don't bother about fine attachment. Just know the modes of attachment. Okay? So that long head of biceps brachii is attached to the supraglenoid tubercle or 0.5 millimeter the posterior surface of or is it anterior surface? Forget all that. You scapula. That's all. Long head of biceps brachii arises from scapula. That's all you need to know. Don't bother about fine attachments when you're talking about crossing them. And then from one bone you go to the other bone through synovial joints, through the functional synovial joints. For example, let's take clavicular fibers of pectoralis major. Origin clavicle, insertion humerus. How will you go from clavicle to humerus passing through synovial joints? So clavicle you have to go to scapula, acromioclavicular joint. And from scapula you can go to humerus, glenohumeral joint. So clavicular fibers of pectoralis major crosses acromioclavicular joint and glenohumeral joint. They do not cross the sternoclavicular joint. Whereas sternal fibers of pectoralis major, origin sternum, insertion humerus. From sternum, if you want to reach the humerus, you will go from sternum to clavicle, clavicle to scapula, scapula to humerus. So sternal fibers crosses 3 joints. Is it clear? There are some fibers of of the pectoralis major which arise from the costal cartilages, sternocostal fibers. So costal fibers of pectoralis major start from costa and reach humerus. How do they reach? From costa to sternum, costosternal joints, from sternum to clavicle, clavicle to scapula, scapula to humerus. So costal fibers cross one additional joint, the costosternal joint also. Because there is no direct synovial joint between ribs and clavicle. It has to go through the sternum. Let's take the other example, second example. Pectoralis minor at sternoclavicular joint. Pectoralis minor arises from ribs. Whether it's third, fourth, fifth, whether it's second, third, fourth, or second, third, fourth, fifth, doesn't really matter. Ribs. Inserts on scapula. How will ribs reach scapula through synovial joints? Ribs to sternum, sternum to clavicle, clavicle to scapula. All these 3 joints it crosses. So obviously it crosses the sternoclavicular joint, even though it doesn't seem to be so. Ribs are lateral, scapula is lateral, sternoclavicular joint is medial. So it doesn't seem to be crossing in the ordinary sense of our meaning, crossing the road. Latissimus dorsi, levator scapulae, acromioclavicular joint. Levator scapulae arises from cervical vertebra. Inserts on scapula. Cervical vertebra are not directly connected to scapula. So cervical vertebrae to ribs, ribs to sternum, sternum to clavicle, clavicle to scapula. Okay? No, rather cervical vertebrae, there are no ribs also. Cervical vertebrae to thoracic vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae to ribs, ribs to sternum, sternum to clavicle, clavicle to scapula. All these joints are crossed by the small muscle levator scapulae. Cervical joints, cervicothoracic joints, thoracocostal joints, costosternal joints, sternoclavicular joint, and acromioclavicular joint. Latissimus dorsi, sacroiliac joint. Few fibers of latissimus dorsi arise from iliac crest, ilium, and inserts on humerus. All fibers inserts on humerus. How is ilium connected to humerus? Through synovial joints. Ilium to sacrum, sacroiliac joint. Sacrum to lumbar, lumbosacral joint. Lumbar vertebrae with each other, interlumbar joints. Lumbar vertebrae with thoracic vertebrae, thoracolumbar joints. Thoracic vertebrae with ribs. No, thoracic vertebrae with each other, interthoracic joints. Thoracic vertebrae with ribs, costovertebral joints. Ribs with sternum, costosternal joints. Sternum with clavicle, sternoclavicular joint. Clavicle with scapula, acromioclavicular joint. And scapula with humerus, glenohumeral joint. So latissimus dorsi crosses the sacroiliac joint, interlumbosacral joint, interlumbar joint, thoracolumbar joint, interthoracic joints, costothoracic joints, costosternal joints, sternoclavicular joint, acromioclavicular joint, and glenohumeral joint. Is this clear? How do you understand with the meaning of the word cross? It arises from iliac crest, inserts on humerus. Where is sternoclavicular? Appears to be very far away. But it crosses. Because the meaning of the word cross is not like a dog crossing the road. Long head of biceps brachii crosses the shoulder joint. Arises from scapula, inserts on radius. So it crosses the scapulohumeral joint, that is the shoulder joint. Then it crosses the humero-ulnar joint, that's the elbow joint. And it crosses the radioulnar joint because it's inserted on radius. Is this clear? At shoulder it flexes weak. At elbow it strongly flexes. At radioulnar it strongly supinates. Brachialis at radioulnar joint. Brachialis arises from humerus, inserts on ulna, so it does not cross the radioulnar joint because the functional elbow joint is humero-ulnar. End of the story. Brachialis does not cross any other joints. Pronator teres arises from humerus. Where in the humerus is not very important. But it arises from humerus, few fibers, and they insert on radius. A few fibers of pronator teres arise from ulna and inserts on radius. Those fibers which are arising from humerus cross the elbow joint. Those which are starting from ulna going to radius cross only radioulnar joints. Those which are arising from humerus cross the humero-ulnar as well as radioulnar. Is this clear? So pronator teres crossing elbow joint is half correct, half wrong. Humeral fibers are correct, ulnar fibers are wrong. Is this point clear? Have you understood crossing? So the statement, muscles act at joints only if they cross them, you should understand what is the converse, what is vice versa, what is corollary. We often use these terms interchangeably. Let's try to understand. I have a dog whom I like very much. I take the dogs out for a walk. Then she also has a dog. Who is she? I am not going to specify. She also has a dog. She also likes the dog very much. She also takes the dog out for a walk. We often meet in the park when we are walking the dog. I'll make a statement. I love her dog. I love her dog. Vice versa, her dog loves me. That's vice versa. I love her dog. Converse, she loves my dog. That's converse. Our dogs don't like each other. Therefore, we also don't like each other. This is called corollary. Is this statement correct? Is it a correct corollary or a wrong corollary? Is this statement correct or wrong? Meaning, is it logical or illogical? Is a correct logic. If the dogs don't love each other, they can't stay with each other. They can't stay with each other. I said in the beginning, I love my dog very much. She also likes her dog very much. If the dogs are not compatible, we also cannot be compatible. We don't love each other. Our love for our dog is greater than our love for each other. So incorrect corollary. Similarly, if you take the corollary of this statement, muscles act at joints only if they cross them, means if the muscles don't cross joints, they will not act on them. If the muscles don't cross the joints, they will not act on those joints. Is this clear? This is the correct corollary. If you take the wrong corollary, muscles will act at joints if they cross them. That is the wrong corollary. There may be a muscle which is crossing a joint, yet not acting on the joint. It says if the muscles act on the joints, they have to cross them. But just because they are crossing them need not mean they have to act. But if they are not crossing, they will not act. Am I making this statement clear? Should I repeat this? If a muscle does not cross a joint, it will not act on the joints, is a correct statement. Just because a muscle crosses a joint, it has to act on the joint, is a wrong corollary. So that completes one statement out of 5. Second statement, strength of a muscle is directly proportional to the cross-sectional area. Very easy to understand. This is fusiform muscle. Take the cross-section at the thickest point. Whatever is the area of that cross-section, that's called cross-sectional area. For parallel muscles, this is so very simple. But take the example of pinnate muscle. In these two diagrams, the two muscles appear to be nearly equal in cross-sectional area. But that is not so. Individual muscle fibers are individual vectors. Bring all the vectors into one plane and then take the cross-section. So you will understand that pinnate muscles are enormously more cross-sectional area if you bring all the fibers into one plane. So when you are taking a cross-section area of pinnate muscle, don't just take a blade, cut through and look at the surface area. That's not the correct answer. You have to bring every fiber to a single plane and then take the cross-sectional area. That's why pinnate muscles are extremely powerful compared to a corresponding size parallel muscle or a fusiform muscle. We have already discussed this yesterday. The angle between line of muscle pull and the line of tendon is less than 30 degrees and cos of 30 degree is more than 0.9. They don't lose their potency much. 10% maybe pinnate muscles. So it's directly proportional to cos alpha, and alpha lesser than 30 degrees. So we are resolving them into two components. Muscles act best if the line of pull is at right angles to axis of movement. Consider this is the axis around which the movement takes place. One muscle is going vertically up. The other muscle is going obliquely up. And the obliquity is angle theta. If you resolve these muscles into their respective direction of fibers into two components, one vertical component, other horizontal component, the vertical component of the oblique muscle is directly proportional to sine theta. So if the muscles are at right angles, 90 degree, sine 90 maximum, 1. If they are 0 degrees, no movements. Remember, the axis of radioulnar pronation supination passes from the upper end of radius to the lower end of ulna. Passes from the upper end of radius to the lower end of ulna, which is nearly vertical. Upper end of radius to lower end of ulna in anatomical position is nearly vertical. Biceps brachii muscle is also vertical. Biceps, we said, is a strong supinator, but the angle between biceps and radioulnar rotation are parallel to each other. Sine 0 is 0. Biceps brachii cannot supinate extended elbow. Biceps brachii cannot supinate extended elbow. Biceps brachii will strongly supinate a 90-degree flexed elbow. So keep the elbow flexed at 90 degrees. Radioulnar rotation is anteroposterior. Biceps brachii is vertical. Sin 90 maximum. So biceps brachii is the best supinator at 90-degree elbow flexion. And zero power to supinate in 180-degree extended elbow. And half the power if the elbow is extended to 150 degrees, because sin 150 is half. Sin 120 is root 3 by 2. Sin 90 is 1. Is this clear? How much should you keep the elbow flexed? If you want to tighten a screw, you have to keep the elbow flexed at 90 degrees. Your carpenter also knows this. The carpenter keeps his elbow flexed by 90 degrees, then he tightens the screw. He has no knowledge of science. You have to tell him, you know why you are flexing your elbow? He says, I find it more convenient. No, it's not convenience. It is sin theta. He knows by experience that the power is weakened if you do not flex the elbow. We have learnt why their power is weakened. Because you want the muscle to be at right angles. So this is the biceps brachii, which is vertical pull and radioulnar rotation, vertical in anatomical position. That is why in such a case, a muscle which is slightly oblique will have a better pull, because there is some angle at least. But if the muscle is like this, then it is best, because that's 90 degrees. So the first muscle arrow which is pointing upwards is biceps brachii. Zero action of supination, pronation in extended elbow. The second muscle which is obliquely shown is pronator teres, which is helping in pronation. And the third muscle which is horizontally placed is pronator quadratus, which you will learn in the forearm, which is at right angles to radius ulna. Pronator quadratus is a better pronator than pronator teres, because pronator quadratus is right angles to radioulnar rotation. Is this clear? Forces of a muscle are described. Yesterday we discussed this. Shear, no, we didn't discuss. We discussed only the spin component, but there are forces which are called as shear component, which can be split into compressive component and tensile component. When you pull this bone, mobile bone, what is labeled as mobile bone, when you pull it towards the flexed bone, if the bone were not strong enough, they will bend. The bone will bend. When the bone bends with the concavity upwards, you will realize that the upper part, the bone are being compressed, and the lower part of the same bone is being stretched. Stretching of a bone is prevented because of tensile strength, because of the collagen fibers in the bone. Compression is prevented in a bone because of calcium phosphate in the bone. So the inorganic component is responsible for the compressive strength of the bone. And the organic part, the collagen fibers, are responsible for tensile strength of the bone. The bone should not be stretched beyond a certain limit. What will happen in such a case is that upper part there is more compressed inorganic salts, compressive component, and the lower part there is more tensile component, more collagen fibers which are responsible. Of course, collagen and calcium phosphate is present all throughout the bone, but the responsibility of collagen is on the convex surface, and that of the calcium phosphate is on the concave surface. Automatically you will realize in the middle of the bone, the compressive and tensile forces cancel out each other. Net result, whether the middle of the bone has bone or bone marrow doesn't really matter. does not affect the strength of the bone. That is why there is a space located in the center of the bone, because there is neither tensile forces there nor compressive forces there. There are no forces there, no bone required, no bone there. And in birds, that marrow is filled with air to make them lighten. It is filled with fat in humans, adult humans, to make it little light. Not so much that you will be blown away by the air, but not heavy enough that it will be a struggle to walk or hold. When the axis is transverse, flexion and extension, muscles have to cross the joint either in front, then they will be flexors, or behind, they will be extensors. If they intersect the axis, they will neither flex nor extend. They have to be in a different plane. They have to be either in front or behind. Front ones are flexors, back ones are extensors. We are talking about elbow joint. Same thing holds true for wrist joint. Same thing holds true for finger joints. Is not the same when you talk about knee joint. Because knee joint, those which cross the knee joint from back are flexors. Those which cross from front are extensors. Abduction and adduction takes place around anteroposterior axis. So those muscles which cross the anteroposterior axis superolaterally are abductors. Those which cross inframedially are adductors. So we know supraspinatus crosses the shoulder joint above, deltoid crosses the shoulder joint laterally. Supraspinatus and deltoid are abductors of the shoulder joint. And teres major, pectoralis major, latissimus dorsi cross the shoulder joint inframedially. So they are adductors. Whereas subscapularis, teres minor and infraspinatus are, subscapularis lies in front of humerus, infraspinatus and teres minor lies behind humerus, but they intersect the axis anteroposterior, and therefore subscapularis are neither abductors nor adductors because they are intersecting the axis. Teres minor behind the humerus intersecting the axis. Any muscle which intersects the axis cannot bring about movement around that axis. They have to be either superolateral or inframedial, not intersecting the axis. And of course, when it comes to rotation, it's around the vertical axis, what is shown by that white dot through and through the bone. Muscles starting from medial and crossing the axis anteriorly are medial rotators. Muscles which start from medial but cross posteriorly are lateral rotators. Remember, rotation, the reference point is anterior surface. If the anterior surface is brought medially, it is called medial rotation. The anterior surface is brought laterally, that means posterior surface is brought medially, it is called lateral rotation. Is this point clear? So you just have to know the names of the bones of attachment to understand whether it acts on the joint or not, and you have to know whether it crosses the joint anteriorly, posteriorly, supralaterally, inframedially, from medial to anterior or medial to posterior. Based on that, you can predict what the action of the muscle will be. To end the lecture, I had spoken one sentence yesterday. Phew, or wow, I need a drink. Alcoholic, of course, after the heavy lectures involving quantum mechanics. Did you find out anything? Let us look at the number of letters each word has. Wow. How many letters? I. Need. A. Drink. alcoholic of course. Course, MBBS course. After the heavy lectures involving quantum mechanics. Okay, so you got the numbers as 3.1415926535897. This is the first 14 digits of the number pi. I could never remember those 14 digits. So I remember this. Wow, I need a drink. Alcoholic, of course, after the heavy lectures involving quantum mechanics. If the sentence goes on, you can remember up to million letters of pi. But I think 14 is good enough. Shall we stop here? You can proceed to the dissection hall and start your dissection for the day. You have finished your dissection, you can continue dissecting for the next day.